Hola! Today we are going to look at los días de los muertos. Sometimes you will see it singular, el día de los muertos. But los días de los muertos means the days of the dead. It is a holiday that is mostly celebrated in Mexico, although you do see it sometimes a little south of there, and of course you see a lot of it in the United States as well. Some of you may have already seen this presentation, depending on whether or not you saw it last year, but that's okay. It doesn't hurt you to see it again. I want to first just say that Los Días de los Muertos, this is not the Mexican Halloween. You will often hear people say that, oh, that's just the Mexican Halloween. It's not. It is a different holiday. It's not simply their celebration of Halloween. It does happen around the same time of year. You do see some similarities, but there are a number of significant differences. So let's jump right in. First of all, Los Días de los Muertos means the days of the dead, a pretty literal word-for-word translation, the days of the dead. This is something where the roots of it began about 3,000 years ago, and it comes from the Aztecs. And so we are looking at, we are talking about the Aztecs. We are talking about the native peoples that were here on this side of the world, in this hemisphere, and we are talking about Mexico through what is today Mexico through Central America is more or less where the Aztecs were. So let's talk a little bit about the Aztecs. Here we see somebody dressed up in Aztec garb. They were a highly developed people. They were polytheists, which means, of course, they believed in many gods rather than a monotheist who believes in one god, or an atheist who believes in no gods. They are some of the peoples that were known for human sacrifice. They did build pyramids in parts of Mexico and Central America. They are not as big as some of the famous pyramids that you hear about in Egypt. They tend to have the flat tops rather than going all the way up to a point. But they did build pyramids. They had a powerful military. They had a system of writing. And then we get to this little lady. It's a nice big long word there. Mictacasihuat is her name, and there's a somewhat accurate pronunciation of that, Mictacasihuat. She was the goddess of death and the underworld, according to the Aztecs, and you see here a couple of idols honoring her. They had a month-long celebration in honor of Mictacasihuat that sort of took place in August, more or less. They didn't have our calendar, so it's not like they could just say, well, it starts on August 3rd or anything like that. But around that time of the year, they had this month-long celebration in honor of her. And it was during that time that they believed that the dead came back to life. Let's talk about skulls, because we see a lot of skulls during the days of the dead. Excuse me. So let's talk about why. I told you that the Aztecs had a powerful military. They kept skulls as trophies after they would conquer a people. And they would display them during this month-long ritual that took place sort of towards the end of summer in August. These skulls symbolize the idea of death and rebirth. The Aztecs believed that death was a continuation of life. It was not the point at which all life stopped. They believed in afterlife, as many religions do, and they believed that death was not to be feared. They believed that life was a dream, and that only when you were dead did you become truly awake. Now we have the conquistadores, which means conquerors, the soldiers from Spain, right? The Spanish warriors. We're talking about the 16th century when they showed up, so the 1500s, and they conquered the Aztecs. And the Spanish warriors, the Spanish people from Spain, were Catholic, and so they brought their Catholic faith with them. The Aztecs had their faith, their polytheist faith, and the Catholics had their monotheist faith. And when the Spanish warriors conquered them, they began the process of conversion. So let's talk about that. They began to convert. Oh, I lost my arrow. There's supposed to be a little arrow there. They began to convert the Aztecs from paganism, worshiping many gods, to Catholicism, worshiping the Christian God. And they did not like this ritual in honor of what they considered a pagan goddess of Mictacasihuat. But when you uh, come across the people who have been practicing something for hundreds or thousands of years, it's awfully hard to just get them to stop. So instead of just trying to stop the ritual, they decided to make it more Christian instead. And you see this kind of thing a lot throughout history. What they did is they moved it to our calendar dates of November 1st and 2nd. And so you can see why this often gets kind of wrapped up with the idea of Halloween, which is October 31st. But they moved it to November 1st and 2nd because in the Catholic calendar, those are All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, two holidays that they were already celebrating in honor of Christian saints and in honor of the souls of people who have departed. And so you can see that there's a little bit of similarity there between um, a celebration that honors death and the death goddess, and these celebrations that honor saints that have come before us and the souls of people that have died. So let's look at Los Días de los Muertos as it is today. So today it's this blending of the Spanish and the Aztec cultures. We see both kind of coming together in this one celebration. Modern Mexicans are mostly Catholic, but there is this Aztec influence in their culture. And during Day of the Dead is this time where they try to laugh at death, which makes it different from our Halloween, where on Halloween we are trying to scare people and play tricks on each other and make it frightening. But Day of the Dead is a different approach to death. It's more of this sort of celebrating people that have passed away and making death something funny and amusing rather than something scary. So the modern celebration, like I said, it's a chance to laugh at death, but it is also a time to honor deceased loved ones, which makes it similar to our Memorial Day in a sense. So let's look at some things associated with Los Días de los Muertos. First, we have una ofrenda, which is an offering. And as we look at some of these things, if you've seen the Pixar movie Coco, you're going to recognize some of this stuff. The idea of having your picture placed on the ofrenda is a major plot point in that movie. That's not something they made up for the movie. That's something that is part of Los Días de los Muertos. So with this ofrenda, you would have a picture of a person that is important to you, often a family member, who has died, and then you might put some of their favorite things around them in this ofrenda. You might put some of their favorite foods or their favorite beverages or whatever. We also have a calaca, which is a word for a skeleton. You will often see these skeletons dressed up and doing the types of things that people do every day. It's the idea that life continues on after death. And so you see them wearing clothes. You might see these skeletons, these calacas driving cars or doing any kind of just sort of day-to-day activities. Just again, like I said, continuing the idea that life continues on after death. And then these are popular, the calaveras dulces, calavera being a skull, and the calavera dulce meaning sugar skull or sweet skull. It is sort of the treat associated with Dia de los Muertos, similar to an Easter bunny on Easter for here in the United States, or a candy cane on Christmas. It's just when you think of Dia de los Muertos and you think of a sweet treat on Dia de los Muertos, sweet skulls, sugar skulls, calaveras dulces, that's the thing that people think of. And then unos disfraces, which just means costumes. People do dress up for Dia de los Muertos, but it is not Frankenstein and Spider-Man and anything you want to be, like it is here when we dress up for Halloween. Generally, you dress up as skeletons or skulls. It is this sort of the calaca or the calavera. It's this dressing up as something dead, but not really something horrifying. Just sort of a funny kind of skeleton or skull kind of thing. Now, here are some other things. El Diablo, which is the devil. You will sometimes see devil pinatas, for example, where you might beat a devil pinata and the candy will come out. Sort of part of the Catholic influence in this holiday. Otra calavera just means another skeleton. And then un desfile, which is a parade. So you will see parades during Dia de los Muertos as well. And you can see, it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but there's a guy here dressed up in a skeleton costume, sort of leading this cart here. Other things, and again, if you've seen the movie Coco, you've seen this. El Cementerio. The cemetery is a big deal during Dia de los Muertos. They light cemeteries up at night during these days, and people will sing songs and kind of clean up the grave sites and just sort of have a somber atmosphere, but yes, a celebratory atmosphere at the same time, because you are honoring these people that have passed on. And tons of flowers, which I really forgot to mention on the previous slide. The marigold, that orange flower, is one of the biggest symbols of Dia de los Muertos as well. You see a lot of that in the movie Coco as well. There are marigold flower petals all over that movie for that reason. And you see a lot of them in the cemeteries during Dia de los Muertos. Here you see the cemetery lit up at night with candles. See some of the marigolds in that picture. And again, just a lot more flowers here as well. One more thing, if the calavera dulce is the sugary thing that is most associated with Day of the Dead, the other food that is most associated is pan de muerto, which means bread of the dead. And you will see it often shaped like a skull, like you see on the right, or you'll see this other loaf with sort of the crossed bones on it that you see there on the left.